In this unit, we are going to discuss the many different communication techniques that you'll experience in your new career. We're going to talk about the importance of each aspect of the communication cycle. We're going to hopefully understand the value of nonverbal communications in our role as public safety communicators. We're going to hone active listening skills and what exactly that means. And we're going to understand, hopefully, the hardships between the limitations we face while handling communications over the phone and radio. So let's talk about communications. Communication is the art of transmitting an idea from the mind of one person to the mind of another with understanding. Less than 10% of all communications is actually verbal, while most understanding is achieved by other means, such as facial expressions, voice inflection, body language. Communication is challenging for us in our role as communication specialists because we most often have to handle information over the phone, and we don't have that face-to-face. We're not able to pick up that body language, the facial expressions. Because of this, we have to have extensive training in active listening and critical thinking. The four major components of an effective communication include the sender, the message, the receiver, and feedback. Notice I said effective communication. The human race has perfected ineffective or bad communication with assumptions, misunderstandings, tone, attitude. I could go on and on. For successful transference of information from one to another, these four components must be utilized properly: the sender, the message, the receiver, and feedback. But even then, there are a lot of variables that can interfere with successful communication. So let's look at those a little closer. The sender. Someone has to initiate communicating. The sender has information to be shared, and they must start the process of sharing that information in some format. For successful communicating, the sender must put thought into what they need to convey and how they should convey it. They must take into account their audience. We make adjustments depending on who we are sending information to. For example, you probably speak to your child much differently than you speak to your boss. The information the sender is giving is the message. Decisions must be made by the sender on what part of the information is important, what needs to be emphasized, what needs to be relayed. Failure to think this through properly can lead to misunderstanding. Important parts of the information may be left out or glossed over, which can change the meaning of what is in the intended message. The receiver is the intended recipient of the information. The receiver has responsibility as well. The receiver takes in the information, processes it, and could possibly misinterpret it. Distraction, bad attitude, preconceived notions, they all can interfere with the information that is being relayed to the receiver. A response from the receiver to the sender is called feedback. Feedback can be in the form of a comment, a gesture, or even recapping what they heard. Feedback is vital as it is the key indicator that the information was actually received correctly. Mutual understanding is the goal, but both the sender and the receiver have a responsibility to make sure that the goal is met. The feedback is the receiver's way of ensuring a mutual understanding has been achieved. Sometimes you may hear people refer to the fifth element of the communication process, and this is called the medium. A medium is defined as the method or manner in which information is conveyed. Face-to-face conversation is by far the most effective, successful way of communicating. Other mediums provide a list of obstacles and hindrances. In the center, face-to-face communication is best. However, email is predominantly used. We rely heavily on email to pass on information about policy changes, new rules or regulations, maybe what's been going on over the last 24 hours. Email can be very easily misinterpreted, and it is very impersonal. Several centers rely on email as a form of documentation because if you didn't document it, it didn't happen, right? While I agree with that adage, a much better form of communication in the center is to have a good old-fashioned face-to-face conversation and then go back and recap it in an email if you need to capture it for documentation purposes. I'm a big fan of, hey, I need you to help me with X, Y, and Z. I'll send you an email to remind you. And then I'll go back and send the email per our conversation. You're going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do A, B, and C. We'll reconvene next week. This helps clear up any misunderstanding. It prompts the information before the email is sent. We can ask questions, we can make clarification. The sender, the receiver can clear up all of the facts. So let's talk about how real life works with the communication cycle in mind. Let's say I share information with a friend. That friend is distracted, looking at their cell phone, not really paying attention to me, only half listening. They miss important parts of what I've just shared with them, and they didn't get the full picture. But they respond, although their response is not what I was expecting, and I think it's kind of impersonal and hurtful. I assume they don't really care what I just told them about, when in fact they just didn't hear me. The mutual understanding is not there. I get insulted, I get hurt, I shut down and decide I don't want to communicate with that person anymore because obviously they don't care, they're not listening. Or they heard me and they don't care, they gave me the wrong response than what I was expecting. Does this sound familiar? This is a classic misunderstanding where the cycle was not complete. A mutual understanding was not achieved. In this real-life example, we have several areas of concern for breaking down the communication cycle. The sender, as a sender, I didn't emphasize the important parts. Maybe I didn't get their attention before I just started talking. Maybe I didn't deliver it in a manner in which to get their attention. The receiver was distracted. It's kind of rude to stay on your phone when someone's talking to you, but we do it every day in real life, don't we? The feedback was not what I was expecting, but instead of clarifying or asking questions or talking further, I got mad and shut down. This happens every day, and it's not effective communication. As an emergency communication specialist, we have to be above that. We're the trained professional, and we have to be able to communicate effectively and not let our emotions shut us down from communicating. This type of misunderstanding happens every day in real life, but we cannot allow it to happen in our jobs. We cannot allow it to happen in our communicating with the citizens or the responders or our coworkers. And you have to remember, as we talk about dealing with the citizens and the responders, we're going to add on extra stress by a heightened sense of awareness, a heightened sense of urgency. Most people we deal with on the regular basis are in crisis mode, so we have to know how to effectively communicate with them well. And that's what we're going to go over more thoroughly in the next couple of units.